You want to hear about the most dangerous phone call I ever answered? Come sit down, because this one taught me that sometimes the biggest threats come from the most powerful people. It was 1991. I'd been on the bench for 6 years, still young enough to be impressed by titles, still naive enough to think that powerful people respected the boundaries of justice. Boy, was I wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, about 10:30. I just finished hearing a string of routine cases, traffic violations, small disputes, the usual municipal court business. My clerk, Mrs. Patricia Noonan, knocked on my chamber door. "Judge," she said, "there's a phone call. Says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "Senator William Morrison. He says it's about a case on your docket today." Senator Morrison, 20-year veteran of the United States Senate, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the kind of man whose endorsement could make or break judicial careers, the kind of man who, at that time in my life, still intimidated me just by existing. I picked up the phone. "Senator Morrison, this is Judge Caprio." His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Frank," he said, using my first name like we were old friends, "I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I understand you have my nephew on your docket this morning." His nephew. I quickly scanned my afternoon cases. There it was, David Morrison, age 22, charged with assault and battery, disorderly conduct, and threatening a public official. "Senator, I can't discuss pending cases." "Of course, Frank. I understand the ethical constraints. I'm not asking you to discuss anything. I'm simply calling to provide some context that might not be in the file." Context, that's what he called it. "Senator, if there's relevant information about the case, it should come through proper legal channels." "Frank," and his voice took on a different tone, still friendly, but with something underneath that made my stomach tighten. "David is a good kid, honor student at Brown University. This incident was completely out of character, a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." A misunderstanding. According to the police report, David Morrison had beaten up a homeless veteran outside Camille's restaurant downtown, called him a worthless piece of garbage, and when the responding officer tried to intervene, threatened to have his badge because of who his uncle was. The victim had been hospitalized with a broken nose and cracked ribs. "Senator, I appreciate your concern for your nephew, but—" "Frank," he interrupted, and now the friendly tone was completely gone. "Let me be very clear about something. David's future is at stake here. He's applying to Yale Law School. A conviction could destroy everything he's worked for. Senator, that's exactly why we have courts, to determine guilt or innocence based on evidence." Evidence. He said the word like it tasted bad. "Frank, you're a smart man. You understand how these things work. Sometimes evidence can be interpreted different ways. Sometimes witnesses remember things differently than they initially reported." I felt my father's voice in my head, warning me about men who used smooth words to corrupt justice. But I was young, uncertain, still learning to trust my instincts. "Senator, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to remember that good people sometimes make bad decisions in stressful moments. I'm asking you to consider the totality of David's character, not just one incident. And Frank?" "Yes?" "I'm asking you to remember that judges who show wisdom and compassion in difficult cases tend to have long, successful careers, while judges who make unfortunate decisions sometimes find their careers taking unexpected directions." There it was, a threat wrapped in silk. "Senator, are you suggesting that my judicial career depends on how I rule in your nephew's case?" "Frank, I'm suggesting that wise judges understand the importance of considering all factors, including the fact that some families have been serving this community for generations and deserve respect for that service." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "On the other hand, judges who show poor judgment, who seem biased against prominent families, well, Such judges often find themselves facing questions about their competence. Sometimes they discover that judicial tenure isn't as secure as they thought. The call ended with pleasantries that felt like poison. I sat in my chambers for 10 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. A United States senator had just threatened my career if I didn't give his nephew special treatment. 2 hours later, David Morrison's case was called. The young man walked into my courtroom like he owned it. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the kind of confidence that comes from never facing real consequences. He had that Morrison family swagger, the way he looked around the courtroom like everyone there existed for his convenience. His lawyer was Jonathan Pierce, one of the most expensive defense attorneys in New England. $800 an hour, silk ties, handmade shoes. The kind of lawyer who specializes in making rich people's problems disappear. But it was David's attitude that bothered me most. He smirked at the prosecutor during opening statements. He whispered dismissive comments to his lawyer during witness testimony. When Mr. Chen, the victim, entered the courtroom, David looked at him with complete disgust and actually laughed under his breath. The victim was Robert Chen, 67 years old, Vietnam veteran who'd served 2 tours and came home to struggle with PTSD and addiction. He'd been homeless for 3 years, living in downtown shelters, trying to stay clean and get his life together. When Officer Martinez found him that night, he was bleeding from his nose and mouth, his few possessions scattered across the sidewalk. Officer Martinez testified first. Professional, thorough, credible. Your Honor, at approximately 11:20 p.m., I received a disturbance call outside Camille's restaurant. When I arrived, I observed Mr. Chen sitting against the wall with visible injuries. The defendant was standing nearby yelling. What specifically did you observe? I heard the defendant call Mr. Chen human garbage and worthless trash ruining our neighborhood. The defendant told him to crawl back under whatever rock you came from. David's lawyer objected. Your Honor, my client was expressing frustration about the homeless crisis. Expressing frustration by verbally abusing a veteran, I asked. But Officer Martinez continued. When I questioned the defendant, he became belligerent. He said, and I'm quoting, "Do you know who I am? My uncle is Senator Morrison. He can end your career with one phone call." I remembered that phone call from his uncle just hours earlier. The same entitled threats. Then Mr. Chen took the stand. Quiet, dignified, despite his circumstances. Your Honor, I was sitting against the restaurant wall, trying to stay warm. This young man came out with friends. They'd been drinking. He looked at me and started yelling. What did he say? He called me a parasite. Said people like me were destroying property values. When I told him I was a veteran, he laughed and said I looked like a loser who got kicked out of the military. Did you do anything threatening? No, sir. I just wanted to be left alone. He pushed me hard. I fell against the wall. He kicked over my cot with all my belongings and stomped on my winter gloves. The security camera footage was devastating. Crystal clear video showing David approaching Mr. Chen aggressively, shoving him down, kicking his cot, standing over him yelling while his friends laughed. When David testified, his arrogance was breathtaking. Your Honor, this homeless individual was aggressively panhandling, making customers uncomfortable. I politely asked him to move along. Mr. Morrison, the video shows you approaching Mr. Chen, not the other way around. The video doesn't show everything. He tried to grab money from my wallet. I was defending myself. That's when David made his fatal mistake. He leaned back with that Morrison smirk and said, "Besides, who's going to believe some drunk homeless guy over a Morrison? I'm a Brown University honors student. He's well, you can see what he is." The courtroom went dead silent. Even his expensive lawyer looked mortified. "Mr. Morrison," I said slowly, "did you just suggest that your last name makes you more credible than the victim?" "I'm suggesting that I'm a Brown University student with no criminal record, and he's well, you can see what he is." That's when I thought about Senator Morrison's phone call. The same entitlement, the same assumption that his family name placed him above the law. Mr. Morrison, you're correct about one thing. I can see exactly what each of you is. I looked at Mr. Chen, sitting quietly in the gallery, wearing clothes that had seen better days, but maintaining his dignity despite everything he'd endured. I see a veteran who served this country and fell on hard times. A man who was minding his own business when he was attacked by someone who thinks homelessness is a crime. Then I looked at David Morrison, still smirking like this was all beneath him. And I see a privileged young man who uses his family's power to escape consequences, who thinks his uncle's position makes him untouchable, who attacked a vulnerable person for the crime of existing in his presence. David's lawyer tried to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. Mr. Morrison, your uncle called me this morning. He made it very clear that my judicial career might suffer if I don't give you special treatment. The courtroom erupted. David's face went white. His lawyer started frantically objecting. Your Honor, any communication from my client's family was a clear attempt to obstruct justice, I finished. Mr. Morrison, based on the evidence presented, I find you guilty on all charges. David jumped up. You can't do this. Do you know who my family is? My uncle will destroy you. Mr. Morrison, your uncle already tried. Now sit down before I add contempt of court to your sentence. His lawyer physically pulled him back into his chair, but the damage was done. Everyone in that courtroom heard him threaten me with his family's power. Mr. Morrison, you are sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service at homeless shelters, and full restitution to Mr. Chen for medical expenses and property damage. 6 months, David screamed, for some homeless nobody? For assault, battery, and threatening public officials. The fact that you refer to a Vietnam veteran as some nobody shows exactly why you need this sentence. As they led David away in handcuffs, he was still shouting about his uncle's power, about how I'd regret this, about how the Morrison family would make sure I never worked again. That afternoon, my phone rang. Senator Morrison again. Frank, you made a very serious mistake today. Senator, I followed the law and the evidence. You ignored my advice about showing wisdom. You embarrassed my family. You treated my nephew like some common criminal. Your nephew is a common criminal. He assaulted an elderly veteran. Frank, you have no idea what kind of enemies you just made. My family has been powerful in this state for 4 generations. We have connections you can't imagine. Senator, are you threatening me again? I'm promising you, judges who cross the Morrison family don't stay judges for long. The call ended with him slamming down the phone. 2 days later, the intimidation began. My parking space at the courthouse was mysteriously reassigned. My court security was reduced. My chamber's air conditioning broke and took weeks to repair. Small things, but the message was clear. Then came the bigger pressure. The State Judicial Review Board received an anonymous complaint about my conduct in the Morrison case. Questions were raised about my temperament, my fairness, my apparent bias against prominent families. For 3 months, I was under investigation. Depositions, interviews, review of all my recent cases. The stress was enormous. My wife barely slept. My kids heard whispers at school about their father being investigated for misconduct. But here's what Senator Morrison didn't count on. The investigation revealed his phone call to me before the trial. Federal investigators got involved. Attempting to influence a judge is a federal crime. The investigation that was supposed to destroy me ended up exposing him. 6 months later, Senator Morrison was censured by the Senate Ethics Committee for attempting to inappropriately influence judicial proceedings. His nephew served every day of his 6-month sentence and completed his community service. But the most satisfying part came 2 years later. Mr. Chen, that homeless veteran, got his life together with help from social services, got clean, found housing, reconnected with his estranged daughter. He sent me a letter on the anniversary of the trial. Judge Caprio, when that rich kid attacked me, I thought nobody would care about one more homeless veteran. When his uncle tried to fix the case, I was sure the system would protect the powerful and forget about me. But you showed me that justice still exists for people like me. Thank you for proving that the law protects everyone, not just people with important names. Senator Morrison never called me again, never tried to intimidate me again, but I never forgot his face, and I never forgot the lesson. Some people think power means getting special treatment. Real power means ensuring everyone gets equal treatment. Since that day, whenever powerful people call my chambers trying to influence cases, I think about David Morrison's smirk and his uncle's threats. And I remember that justice only works when judges have the courage to say no to power. I still see David Morrison occasionally. He never did become a lawyer. Hard to get into law school with a criminal record. Last I heard, he was working for his family's construction company, keeping a low profile. His uncle lost his Judiciary Committee position after the ethics censure, served out his term, but never recovered his influence. Retired in disgrace, his political legacy forever tainted by his attempt to corrupt justice for his spoiled nephew. Mr. Chen is doing well. Married his longtime girlfriend, works part-time at a veterans center, volunteers with homeless outreach programs. Still sends me a Christmas card every year. But the real victory wasn't any individual outcome. It was establishing that my courtroom would never be for sale, no matter who was making the offer. The intimidation campaign that followed David's conviction lasted for months. Senator Morrison used every tool at his disposal to make my life difficult. Court funding requests that I'd submitted were delayed or denied. My requests for additional staff were rejected due to budget constraints. Routine maintenance was postponed indefinitely. But the psychological warfare was worse than the administrative harassment. Anonymous letters arrived at my home. My children were followed from school by people in dark cars. Phone calls came at all hours. When we answered, the line would go dead. The State Bar Association received complaints about my, quote, bias against prominent families. The Judicial Ethics Committee launched 3 separate investigations into my conduct. Each time, teams of expensive lawyers would arrive with briefcases full of accusations and demands for my removal from the bench. For 6 months, I lived under a cloud of suspicion. Every decision I made was scrutinized. Every sentence I imposed was questioned. My reputation, built over 6 years of fair and compassionate service, was under constant attack. My wife Maria bore the worst of it. She couldn't go shopping without hearing whispers about her husband's investigation. Our neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Some friends stopped calling. The breaking point came when someone called Maria's workplace and told her supervisor that she was married to a corrupt judge under investigation. They suggested that employing the wife of someone with questionable ethics might reflect poorly on the company. That night, Maria sat at our kitchen table, crying. Not from fear, but from anger. Frank, she said, we've done nothing wrong. You stood up to a bully, and now they're trying to destroy our family for it. She was right. But I also knew that powerful families like the Morrisons had destroyed good people before. Judges who refused to play their game. Prosecutors who would have looked the other way. Police officers who arrested the wrong person's children. Then something unexpected happened. The federal investigation that Morrison thought would clear his nephew and punish me began uncovering evidence of a much larger pattern of corruption. Phone records, subpoenaed by investigators, revealed that Morrison's call to me wasn't isolated. Over 5 years, he had contacted judges in 17 different cases involving Morrison family members or business interests. Each call followed the same pattern: friendly advice that became threats when judges didn't comply, career advancement suggestions that turned into warnings when judges showed independence. The most damning evidence was a recorded conversation between Morrison and a state Supreme Court justice who had voted against a Morrison development project. The justice had worn a wire after Morrison's staff contacted him about discussing mutual interests. In that recording, Morrison's mask came off completely. His smooth, senatorial voice became the snarl of a man used to buying whatever he wanted. "Judge," Morrison said in the recording, "my family invested $12 million in that project. We have pension funds, charitable foundations, and political committees that depend on that return. Your ruling cost us everything." The justice tried to explain his legal reasoning, but Morrison cut him off. "I don't give a damn about your legal reasoning. I care about results." And judges who consistently rule against Morrison interests find that their careers become very complicated. When the justice asked what that meant, Morrison's answer chilled everyone who heard it. "It means that judicial nominations go through committees I control. It means that court budgets get approved by people who value loyalty. It means that when your name comes up for promotion or reappointment, there will be questions about your judgment, your temperament, your fitness for office." The recording captured Morrison threatening to destroy a sitting judge's career for following the law. When that conversation became public, the political earthquake was immediate. Since that case, word got around. The Morrison family learned that Judge Caprio couldn't be intimidated. Other powerful families got the message too. Politicians, business people, anyone who thought their connections could buy them special treatment, they all learned to take their influence somewhere else. Because in my courtroom, the only title that matters is citizen. The only privilege that counts is the privilege we all share: equal justice under law. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, sometimes the best judgment is not in the book, it's in your heart. But when powerful people try to make your heart afraid, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear. Thanks for listening, and God bless.